Steve, usually they tell us if we're live.
I believe we probably are.
Perfect. Just want to say good morning and welcome to the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee briefing on the Purple Line. At this moment, the committee is joined by Senator Doug Peters, Senator George Edwards, and a number of folks, our Secretary Slater and Kevin Quinn. From an interest of the committee, we have just to get an update on the status, current status of our Purple Line. We know that a settlement agreement went before the Board of Public Works just several weeks ago with a possible resolution of a number of disputes that took place with the contractor. There's a strong interest in understanding how long that settlement agreement will further possibly delay the project and just the effects of the financing on our Transportation Trust Fund, especially with future projects once that has an interest, such as our bus, Penn Station, Howard Street Tunnel, or even WMATA. At this moment, I'd just like to say if anyone has any questions when we get to the question point, if we could just raise our hand, use the raise hand feature. But at this moment, I would like to turn it over to our analyst, Steve McCullough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Steve McCullough, Department of Legislative Services. Today, we've got a brief presentation on the the broad outlines of the settlement agreement that the chairman just referenced. And of course, the Maryland Department of Transportation is here to also answer questions. As alluded, on December 16th of last year, the Board of Public Works approved a settlement agreement between the Maryland Department of Transportation and the Maryland Transportation Administration and the Purple Line Transit Partners. The settlement resolves all of the disputes and litigations related to the change orders and the termination notices, the unconditional termination, the concessionaire default notices. All of that got resolved through the settlement agreement. Next slide, please. So some of the broad terms of the settlement, MDOT MTA agreed to pay $250 million in 2 installments to the Purple Line Transit constructors, the firm building it. Now the PLTC is actually has a contractual relationship with the Purple Line Transit Partners. So MDOT will be paying money to the partners who will then turn around and pay the constructors. Again, 2 installments. The first installment of $100 million was paid on December 28th of 2020. The remaining $150 million payment will be due on the earlier of closing on new financing of the project or the 12th month anniversary of the effective date of the settlement. In addition to the state's payment, the Purple Line Transit Partners will also pay the constructors an additional $16.3 million as part of the settlement. Next slide. So Fleur Enterprises, which was the main contractor under the Purple Line Transit constructors, and any of its affiliates pursuant to this agreement will leave the project completely. They will have no equity stake. They will have no further participation in the construction, and they will not participate in the operations and maintenance entity. Next slide. And this is the original P3 structure, and as you can see here, Fluor is represented in each of those sections. The top section is the equity. They had a 15% stake. They were also the lead contractor as the constructor, and you can see that they were also going to be involved in the long-term operations and maintenance of the project. So again, with this settlement, Fluor and any of its entities are out of the project. Next slide, please. So going forward, the Purple Line Transit Partners in coordination with MDOT MTA will identify and select a replacement design build contractor to step in and finish construction of the project. The settlement envisions a 9-month period, although the Secretary has indicated that they hope that this may take less time than the full 9 months. During this design build contractor selection period, MDOT MTA will continue to manage the project. They back in September, they took over the control of the project and started working with the subs. They will direct some work that is going to focus primarily on reducing the risk to the project. This will involve finishing design, securing needed permits, and doing relocation of utilities. Costs during this period, during the selection period for the new design build contractor, will be split 50-50 between MDOT MTA and the Purple Line Transit partners, with the partner's share capped at $50 million. It's currently estimated that this amount of work will comprise about $100 million. So 50 million from the state, 50 million from the Purple Line partners. Next slide, please. As part of this settlement, and in part with bringing a new contractor on board, design build contractor, new financing will be obtained, and it will also involve the restructuring of existing debt, primarily the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act loan, or TIFIA loan, which is a federal loan to the project. As yet, there have been no draws on that loan, but changes in the market and changes to the project due to this whole process, that loan will be restructured and used to support the ongoing project. When the new finance is secured, the intention is that the MDOT MTA second installment of the settlement payment, this $150 million, will be financed through this new financing, and the repayment of that $150 million, which is financed, will be repaid through the availability payments that the department will be making to the concessionaire over the 30-year operating term of the concession. Next slide, please. So there is always the possibility that despite the movement that has occurred in the settlement agreement, does anticipate or provide for the termination of the P3 if the new financing or the design build contractor cannot be brought on board. It would terminate on the 60th day following the 9-month anniversary of the settlement agreement. Of course, before that happens, a new agreement could be reached to extend that, but the settlement agreement does contemplate, or at least allow for, the fact that there is still a possibility that the P3 agreement would terminate. Should that occur, MDOT MTA would be immediately required to pay the second installment, the $150 million, plus the project termination payments pursuant to the P3 agreement as amended. Obviously, that is not expected at this point to be the contingency, but that is out there as a possibility. Next slide, please. The project cost and schedule for the project now is not known at this point until the design build contractor is on board. The new financing structure has been put in place. We can't really say what that final cost and what this new schedule will be. But we do know that the additional modifications to the P3 agreement that these activities will require, bringing on the new contractor, approving new financing, will also require BPW approval. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. I have one question, and then I'm gonna move to the committee to see if they have any questions. On page 6, you talked about the cost sharing, the 50-50 cost sharing. Is that on top of the $250 million? Is that $50 million expectation on top of?
That is an addition to that amount, but it is directly related to constructing the project. So to one extent, they'll be paying upfront what would have been added to the end, of the process. But yes, it will be a cash flow that they need to manage. But 50 million in terms of the full MDOT capital project or program is within the realm of the type of handling that they do on a normal ongoing process. There's always cash flow needs for projects that are delayed or moving ahead. So this will just fit in with that kind of process.
Thank you. I'm going to now ask, are there any questions of the committee for Mr. McCullough? I'm going to move on to Secretary Slater, and if you can introduce your team also. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair McCray, Senator Peters, Senator Edwards. Great to see everyone. I hope everyone is well. For the record, my name is Greg Slater, Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation. With me this morning are MTA Administrator Kevin Quinn, MTA Executive Director for Transit Development and Delivery Matt Pollack, and MDOT Chief Financial Officer Jacqueline Hartman. I want to start by providing an overview of the settlement agreement in a little bit more detail than Mr. McCullough, as presented to the Board of Public Works last month. And then Matt can provide a little bit of an update on construction with a little more scheduled detail, including some of the things happening in the next day or so, and the replacement of the design build contract solicitation. And we'll also be here to answer any questions that you may have on this and how it relates to some of the other efforts that we have across the department. Just by way of background, as many of you know, the Purple Line is a 16.2 mile east-west light rail line that runs across Montgomery and Prince George's County. It's been a long sought project, been on the books for many, many decades, and we're excited to get it out. You may recall that in the beginning of the development of the Purple Line construction in 2016, MDOT and MTA pursued a public-private partnership for its development, the final design, the build, the finance, operate, and then maintain delivery model of a P3. PLTP, or the Purple Line Transit Partners, was selected as the concessionaire under this P3 agreement and is responsible for the key aspects of the final design, the construction, the financing, the operations, and the maintenance of the Purple Line over the 6-year design and construction period and the 30-year operating period. So the Purple Line, unfortunately, has faced a number of obstacles over the years, many of which have led us to where we are today. The latest of which was on August 3rd, 2016, when the United States District Court for the District of Columbia vacated the Federal Transit Administration's record of decision that certified the project adherence to certain environmental regulations and laws. This record of decision is a prerequisite for commencement of all construction activities. So on July 19th, 2017, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia stayed that decision of the District Court, thereby reinstating the ROD and allowing the construction to proceed. But the impact had already been felt. After the decision of vacating the ROD, PLTC, which was the construction arm of the team, initiated a series of claims seeking both additional time and money for the project delays. The settlement was executed, that was executed on December 17th, 2021, resolves the risk and expense associated with the litigation, which includes all counterclaims and claims record of decision, as well as the right-of-way, an issue with CSX, and some permitting issues, which cumulatively totaled about $702 million. When adding other change orders, PLTP had alleged nearly $800 million in damages across the board. The settlement includes a payment of an aggregate sum to PLTC of $250 million and an initial payment of $100 million that was made at the end of 2020. That payment has been made successfully. The remaining $150 million is either paid on the date that the new financing documents are executed with the selection of the new design build contractor, so it will be financed, or the 12-month anniversary of the effective date of this settlement. The settlement agreement really outlines the process for, one, the selection of the replacement of the design build contractor that PLTP has initiated the solicitation process already in coordination with MDOT and MTA. But it also includes a couple of other components. On the labor front, PLTC, the construction arm, had a project labor agreement in place for its self-performed work. We also found that some of the contractors also have PLAs in place for their work. So the PLA utilized was a typical PLA and would similarly be utilized for the replacement design build contractor, as it is based upon a standard NIA form that can be readily incorporated into the new design build contractor. The workforce was really important to us there. Additionally, once we get a new design builder, the subcontracts will be reassigned back to PLTP and the new design builder. So we're managing the subcontractors on a day-to-day basis today. You know, while that's a lot of kind of legal talk, the bottom line is the majority of the firms and employees that are constructing the Purple Line now will be very likely the same ones that will continue under a new scenario. In the interim period, while the solicitation is ongoing, we will continue to manage the project ourselves, focusing on de-risking the project by finalizing designs, getting the permits in place, and then progressing the utility work. Every investment that we make right now in the interim period on construction is designed to create some value on the back end when the project is rebid so that we can recover some of the cost challenges. But during this time, MDOT and PLTP are going to share the cost to keep the project moving, with PLTP's cost sharing limited to a $50 million cap. And so once the design builder is selected, all the subcontractors are transferred to MTA and then back to the new design build contractor, otherwise terminated by MTA, except the one that was PLTO, the operating arm that will operate the project for the 30-year, will be reassigned to PLTP. You know, I need to touch a little bit on the project costs because I think they're really important. The revised project costs right now, as Mr. McCullough had noted, is not fully known. We should know that over the next several weeks and months. We won't know that until really the design build contractor is selected and that contract is negotiated and the financial close is achieved. PLTP will finance the additional project costs through a combination of debt and equity. The existing TIFIA loan will be refinanced or restructured to provide additional funds to take advantage of the lower interest rates that are in today's market. The savings from those lower interest rates as part of the settlement agreement will benefit the state 100%. So we will be able to yield that back and the state will repay any additional costs through those availability payments over the 30-year operations and maintenance agreement. Although, you know, not a scenario that we anticipate, I feel really strong about the quality of our partnership. Even the tone of our partnering discussions has completely changed. We had to contemplate what would happen for whatever reason if we were not able to find a new design build contractor. So if a replacement design build contractor is not selected before the period expires and the period to select this replacement design build contractor is not extended by mutual agreement, the P3 agreement would then terminate and PLTP would do termination amounts similar to the ones in the original P3 agreement. And those costs will essentially be for construction that is completed, and we would need to pay that as opposed to over the 30-year O&M. But again, not a scenario that we see likely. And in that scenario, it would allow us time to secure alternative financing to ensure the project gets completed on our own. Importantly, as part of this negotiation, we wanted to be sure that the private sector, as we were partnering there, had some skin in the game. So what we did was, in addition to increasing the equity contribution to the project and the $50 million of contribution on the construction side for cash flow, PLTP had agreed to reduce their internal rate of investment. Basically their profit on the project, the return by 20%. And so that was really important for us. We wanted to show that as a long-term partnership. And while there's still a lot of work to do, this settlement really marks an important step forward in the project. We believe the settlement agreement is in the project's best interest, and we were really happy to see it approved by the Board of Public Works. And we really feel like the project is on a strong path to delivery right now. And I feel like we're in a much better place than we were a year ago. I can tell you the negotiations were tough, and they were every day, but they were really important that we find a deal that was not only in the best interest of the project and ensured its success, but within the best interest of the state. So at this point, let me turn it over to Matt for a few minutes and talk about our construction update, so you know kind of where the project is, where we're focused, a little bit more detail on the schedule and those types of things, and then we can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Secretary. Good morning, Senators. For the record, my name is Matt Pollock, MTA Executive Director for Transit Development and Delivery. I'm going to review the Purple Line construction activities currently underway during the interim period of state-managed construction. And then I'll provide an overview of the timeline for solicitation of the replacement design-build contractor. So we're already looking at the map that shows the entire Purple Line alignment, as well as the transfer locations to Washington Metro on red, green, yellow, and the orange lines. Working from west to east, the alignment between the Bethesda Metro Station and the Silver Spring Metro Station generally runs along the Georgetown Branch Trail right-of-way, outside of utility interference. Since our field activities are concentrated on utility relocations, this area of the alignment is seeing the least amount of construction activity. The predominant effort in this area of the alignment is structural work, basically cleaning up structural wall work that was left incomplete by PLTC's departure and would experience deterioration if not addressed prior to the selection of the replacement design-build contractor. The only utility work in this area is taking place near Talbot Avenue and Jones Mill Road. Looking at the alignment between the Silver Spring Metro Station and the Manchester Place Station, utility relocation work, currently water and sewer work, is progressing along the length of Wayne Avenue. Between the Manchester Place Station and the Long Branch Station, we have the Plymouth Tunnel. Work is underway at Manchester Place to complete the wall work necessary to reestablish the parking area for the Kenwood House apartments. On the east side of the tunnel, work is underway to complete the partially finished invert at the portal. Basically, we're completing the structural floor at the exit of the tunnel. The next major segment is the alignment between Piney Branch Road and the Adelphi Road University of Maryland Station. This area is seeing significant overhead and underground utility relocation activity concentrated along the University Boulevard corridor. Within the University of Maryland campus alignment between the Adelphi Road Station and the College Park Metro Station, utility work is being planned but has not yet commenced. The predominant effort is currently the installation of a new pump station for Campus Drive, where the light rail alignment goes underneath the CSX and the Washington Metro tracks. Continuing east, beyond the University of Maryland and along the alignment towards the Beacon Heights East Pine Station, there's again significant utility relocation activity concentrated along Kenilworth Avenue and Riverdale Road. That work includes water, sewer, and gas. Along Veterans Highway, the predominant work is centered around the Glen Ridge Operations and Maintenance Facility, which will be the primary site for vehicle storage and maintenance. The work advancing includes wall construction, grading operations, and utility relocations. And lastly, the easternmost section from the Glen Ridge Station to the new Carrollton Metro Station is starting to see some utility relocation operations. Next slide, please. Okay, switching over to the replacement design build contractor solicitation, you're looking at the solicitation timeline. In accordance with the settlement agreement, PLTP, our concessionaire, is responsible for initiating, implementing, and managing the solicitation for their replacement contractor. We as the state are in daily communications with PLTP on this effort, providing input and support. PLTP has been diligently preparing the request for qualifications package and hopes to send the package out later today to international, national, and regional firms that have the capability and experience to complete the Purple Line project. Qualifications will be received and evaluated in early February, and the request for proposals will be released to the shortlisted firms in mid-February. March and April is going to be a very busy period for the proposers as they will be touring the alignment and accessing the in-progress documentation to develop their technical and price proposals that take the project to completion. We expect a replacement design-build contractor to be selected in mid-June, with BPW approval and financial close taking place in September. With that, I will pass it back to the Secretary, and I thank you.
Great, thank you, Matt. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Chair McCray, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I guess my first question is in reference to the $100 million that was paid out already, and the second payment that will eventually happen in reference to the $150 million. If you could give a little bit more detail in reference to the source of funds for those two respective payments.
Sure. So the $100 million, so the Purple Line is financed by a couple of different kind of funding sources. One is TIFIA, 2 is a federal grant, and 3 is a state dollar kind of contribution. So we were paying through the waterfall there of those funds, but really the $100 million, that is a cost directly from the trust fund in the project, and so I think there's really, although we've been able to minimize and not necessarily impact other things by kind of cash flow around the 6-year program as we were developing the final CTP, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't just flag that, there's no way around the fact that the $250 million is a cost increase for the project, and the $100 million was an expense for the trust fund as part of the settlement. We do feel like it was a good expense, weighed it through the legal and the other issues associated with the project, and the fact that there were $800 million in claims, then I do think it was within the best interest for us to do. I do think Jacqueline Hartman is on here as well, and maybe she can get a little more detail on the source of funds, but I think from my perspective, it's just really it was funds that we had to allocate as part of from the trust fund.
Good morning, Jacqueline Hartman, Chief Financial Officer for the Maryland Department of Transportation. Yes, so as Greg mentioned, as the Secretary mentioned, as we were updating for the final CTP, we worked into our financial plan that additional $100 million that has now been paid to PLTP. The department did have benefit of some revenue attainment in fiscal 2020 that was a little bit higher than we had expected. And it was right around that $100 million mark. So that kind of gave us it made it certainly a little bit easier than it could have been otherwise.
Got it. Mr. Secretary, because I'm new as the chair, could you talk to me about what was the expected completed date of the Purple Line project when the project first started, and if you can talk to me about what do we estimate is the new completion date. So when was the project supposed to be finished when we first put this idea in the process, and now what current schedule are we on?
Absolutely. Let me kind of start with the end of your question and then kick it over to either Kevin or Matt to kind of talk about kind of where it was in the beginning, because they were much closer to it. But the real end date, we won't know for another few weeks or months once we get those bids. We're thinking about things like accelerated construction as we rebid the project and those types of things to be able to make up some time. In the middle of the project, as things started to get delayed, there was a resequencing of the original service date, and really they tried to break that out into 2 different pieces. There was a piece to College Park, and then there was another piece that they were going to kind of break out and basically start service. We don't think that's a good way to go right now. We think it's more about the kind of overall service date, but so we're happy to follow up later on and give you kind of the final service date once we get that kind of new construction contractor on board. But it's certainly going to be delayed from the original one. And let me kick it over to Kevin and Matt and see if Kevin has a sense of what that original one was back in 2016.
Sure. So good question. I think and Matt, please confirm, just kind of going off the top of my head here, I believe it was March of 2022, I think was the original date. We are looking, it's tough to say, right? As we look to reprocure this, I think we're looking at various measures of, do we have the ability to accelerate construction? How much work can the state get done in the interim to advance this? And so it's tough to nail down exactly when that's going to be. Matt, anything to add to that?
No, that's correct.
Got it. In reference to the $50 million that was discussed on Mr. McCullough's page 6 of his presentation, the 50-50 split, could you talk to us about the source of funding from that $50 million, just so that we're just clear on the issue? You're on mute,
That
Mr.
would be the same source from, there are two sources of the 50 million. So the interim construction period is funded by two different sources. One is state dollars. You know, we had some state dollars programmed in the project itself. So these are project costs that are directly related to construction. We're focusing on utilities and permitting and kind of getting that value on the back end for those products. Essentially, every dollar that we spend today is a dollar that we won't have to spend on the back end in terms of the construction. But we're also trying to do it in a way that it really doesn't impact the broader program and impact other things that we have going on across the state. The other source of funding in the interim construction period is from PLTP. So they're bringing some private equity to help us with some of the cash flows so that we're able to minimize the impact to our program in the interim and get that maximum kind of benefit and value. But it's the same source of funding. It all comes from the trust fund. The only difference is we're spending some dollars in the interim period that in the original plan probably would have been built into the kind of longer term financing, but it's still an expense that we would have had anyway.
Just for clarity, the presentation at request for qualifications, I believe that you said that they were going out today, or I believe Mr. Pollock was the one that was commenting. I just wanted to be in reference to that. And we are looking at a 9-month timeline. How are you all going to be communicating with the respective committees in the Senate and the House in reference to as we go through this 9 months?
That's a great question. So, you know, we're probably making some news right now, but most people didn't realize that those RFQs are going out today. We were working on a little bit of a release on that one and an information kind of going out to the members of the General Assembly that are interested in that on a couple of fronts. So we're going to send an update out this afternoon, but we're looking at getting those RFQ, that request for qualifications, out to about 20 different firms today, or it's either the next day or so, likely today. And so we're excited about that. We think we did some market sounding, and there's a pretty good construction market out there today. There's a hungry labor force out there today for really big construction projects like this. So, you know, we're excited to get that out, and it's one step. I will tell you that the 9-month schedule for the resolicitation that we've laid out is somewhat, you know, we're hoping to do it in a much quicker time frame than that and get it done and get it back in the hands. The sooner we can get this project back in the hands of the private sector to kind of build and maintain, then the sooner that we can stop having to invest some of the state cash flow associated with the construction and those types of things. So we want to accelerate that as best we can.
Got it. Reference to, I know I got from District 23 on this conference, but in Prince George's, there were a number of businesses that expressed extreme concern in reference to the delay and how it's impacting their business. We know that we're going through COVID-19 at this moment, so businesses are already having a challenging experience. If you all could speak to the outreach and if there is some form of help that you all have been able to give these businesses, knowing that we're still going to meet more challenges and delays going forward than what we were expecting.
Thank you, Senator. That's a really important question, and one that I've been focusing on. That's the one thing that really, really concerns me on the delay side, is the continued impacts. These construction projects are awful for businesses and, frankly, the people who live on these corridors. You know, many of these people bought houses on these corridors because they wanted to live on a rail line, but they didn't want to live on an active construction zone. So it's really important for us to kind of, one, communicate with them. So one of our next steps is to get out into the community with the residents. Matt has done a couple of walkthroughs or walking the corridor with a couple of groups, but we want to continue to do that. One of the things I've asked the team to do is really kind of ramp up the community involvement component of it and really kind of get some ambassadors up and down the corridor so that our communities and our businesses have an outlet of somebody that they can reach out to and kind of connect with and get any questions answered, as well as alleviate issues and challenges and problems that we may have with active construction, things that may be limiting customers from able to get to the businesses or limiting some of our citizens who may need to get out and access services or stores or those types of things. You know, it's really important that the construction corridor is, one, as business friendly as we can, so we have these businesses there and thriving when the rail line is done, but two, that the corridor is really a safe place for our residents to travel and walk and kind of get out there and be safe. So, you know, it's really important that we're focused that way. But maybe Matt can talk a little bit about some of the specific efforts, but that's a topic that's really important to me as well.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. The one point I would add is that Prince George's County has a program in place that has some financial resources to help out with the businesses. And we are actually working closely with Prince George's County to help get the word out, because I'm not sure that there is necessarily widespread knowledge about the help that is available through the county.
And my last question, and then going to the committee, is we've acknowledged that obviously the 100 million, the 50 million, and possibly the other 150 million will affect our transportation trust fund, or has some form of it on a transportation trust fund that's already stressed and have a number of issues that pressure our transportation trust fund. Could you talk to how this would affect things such as our bus system, Howard Street Tunnel, WMATA, things that on our transportation trust fund? If you could speak to that, Mr. Secretary.
Absolutely. You know, that was a big focus for us. And so, you know, we wanted to minimize that impact. So any dollar, you know, right now we're trying to finance the 150 million. So although that will impact the trust fund, it's financed over a 30-year period. So it doesn't necessarily kind of hit us as drastically as we would if we'd had to pay that expense up front. It certainly doesn't hit us as drastically as it would if we would have had to come into a $700 or a $500 million settlement associated with the original claims and have some concerns there. But right now, we've been able to hold the other parts of the system harmless. But I say that, you know, somewhat with a grain of salt. I mean, I think we have an added expense that we had to address. So although we didn't have to take that 100 million to cut or impact another program, we did have to utilize that 100 million where we could have utilized that in other areas, but we haven't been able to. We've been able to hold those areas harmless. Right now, you know, Kevin and I are really focused on, as well as the entire department. I'm very focused on a system preservation approach and making sure that, you know, the state of good repair capital budget is where it needs to be, both for transit, but also for highway, both at the Port of Baltimore and at the airport, and trying to kind of lay that out as kind of our first priority and kind of do that as we rebuild this program. I can tell you that I'm a little bit, I'm probably more optimistic today than I was even a week ago or 2 weeks ago on the financial side, because we are starting to see some positive trends down at the Port of Baltimore on the new car auto sales. You know, we're about 20% over where we were last year at the Port of Baltimore right now, and the auto inventory is kind of flowing off the port at a faster pace. So that tells us there might be some positive trends on the revenue front with auto sales that could help us on the trust fund that we maybe didn't expect if you'd asked me a month ago. So, you know, I think as we get there, those investments that we didn't anticipate and that revenue that might come in, we want to invest that in good state of good repair, system preservation efforts across the department. But certainly there's some needs, some great needs over at MTA. We do have our final program coming out in a couple of weeks, and we have some really good investments in that. You know, we have an investment in some light rail system preservation. We've got a $5 million investment coming on some electric bus infrastructure across the city, and some good foundational investments in system preservation across our transit system in Baltimore, including our bus system.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If I can ask, does the committee have any questions? Senator Peters.
I know I didn't use the hand raise thing, but I just did the whole,
I saw it.
So for just some background, I guess, the impacted areas from a legislative standpoint are 21, 22, and 47. It's a northern Prince George's County issue. It doesn't touch me, the 23rd. I start 23rd and then go south. And I've driven that quite a bit, probably once a week. I'm around that area. And I guess the good news, there's no good news with COVID in terms of the deaths, but the other positive news is that the traffic has been a lot lighter in those areas, just to give you an idea. Normally, there are really heavily trafficked areas there. And so that really hasn't been as big an issue with the construction. So that's the good news, 410, that's usually very bad. And it's been lighter. So I guess I got a couple quick questions. One is, what was the overall cost of the project originally? Do you know that?
Let me look over to Kevin and see if he has that back from 2015, 2016.
Sure. So I think the overall cost of construction was around $2 billion, with the total cost over the 30-year of the project, I think, was 5.6. Getting a head nod from that.
What do you estimate now with the P3 that number would be?
So that's both the schedule and the cost will be known a little bit with more clarity over the next couple of weeks and months as we start to get new bids in. So what we're doing now is everything that we think can kind of de-risk a project. So the more we can finish the design, the more we can get permits in place, the more we can move utilities. Those are the big risk items for the private sector when developing construction bids, that you get value on the back end. So as we do more of those, we're going to get value in that new bid that comes in. So when that new bid comes in, then we'll have much more clarity on what the private sector thinks of that. The one piece of rebidding this project that is very challenging is you're kind of asking a construction company to come in and take a half-built project. So there's a lot of due diligence that a contractor will need to do in looking at the quality of the construction, although I think it's very, very good right now, and trying to take that over and kind of own that kind of moving forward. So those are the things that we're focused on. But we'd be happy to, once we get those new bids and start to get a new design build contractor in place, we're going to need to come back to this committee as well as many members of the General Assembly and kind of give a detailed briefing on schedules and costs and the final costs. And at that point, we'll have a great kind of sense of where we think it could have gone over. The good thing is the financing environment today is much better than it was in 2016 when this project was originally financed. So, we're going to get a great benefit in refinancing with the interest rates today that we wouldn't have gotten in 2016.
Okay, so it was originally, as the chairman asked, originally it was supposed to be completed March of 22, and I'm getting it was 5.6 billion, right? Total build out. So my question, I guess, to this is that, we have in Prince George's County a P3 school model, and everybody's looking at this purple line model and saying, well, if this happened here, then this is going to happen here. All the other systems are going with the traditional bonding. So I guess just a thought there is that when it comes time to compare, if we decided to do this traditionally with, like we did the Garvey bonds for ICC, I know you walked into this, Secretary, so it's not, versus doing the P3, did we pay more, which sounds like it might be the case, but we'll see. But did we accelerate it faster? So I guess that's really the question that we're not going to answer today, but maybe we could get the data to take a look at that, because this project's definitely going to determine whether, we go forward with a lot of P3 projects, or we just say, you know what, we tried that, we're just going to go traditional bond financing and go from there. So.
Now, Senator, I think that's a really important question that I'd love to kind of explore a little bit for a minute or so, and then certainly follow up with the committee and have a deeper discussion. I mean, from my perspective, I've done a lot of work, and I'm starting to put some of that really down on paper. I've done a lot of work kind of walking back and trying to understand what went wrong with this project and kind of how we got here and what went right. And so, I'm convinced that the P3 model is a great tool for us. It's a great tool for infrastructure. We're constantly trying to stretch the dollars. Did we accelerate things? I think we can, take the construction. I can tell you that the schedule, it definitely has an impact. This light rail line is not opening in March of 2022. But did we accelerate the delivery of the Purple Line compared to if we would have put that out in the bond? Absolutely, we did. And so we did that by accessing private sector equity to deliver a project today that we just couldn't afford and financing that. I think there are some, you start looking at debt limits and those types of things. I think there's some benefits by bringing the private sector to the table. I also think that, when you're looking for P3s, it's important. A lot of people think about the financial component of a P3. I think it's really important to first focus on the partner part of a P3, because at the end of the day, if you're signing up for a partnership or a relationship with a private sector entity for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, you better make sure that entity and everybody involved with that entity has the same shared values as you, has the same shared kind of approach and wants to solve the issues together. Because the folks that I serve, the folks that you and I serve together, if there's an issue or a problem or something goes wrong, the expectation is that we're going to solve it, not the private sector. And so, we're there to kind of work in partnership. So, my lesson learned, along with a couple of really detailed things that I'd love to kind of talk through at some point, but is just really focus on the partner side and make sure you have a good private sector partner, because, there are good ones and bad ones in every business, and just trying to find the right partner.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Edwards.
I don't know where the hand thing is up there either, so I apologize for that. But, I had two questions, both of which already been asked, but I do have another one. And Mr. Chairman, you kind of asked, and if you answered it, Mr. Secretary, I flew over my head the way you went through it real quick with some other projects like the Howard Street Tunnel double stacking situation, which I think is very, very important economically for the whole state. Where are we at with that?
That project was not impacted in any way. We're working on a couple of different pieces of that, and it's well on schedule. We're looking to get a NEPA approval in place later on this year and get that project underway. Our partnership with CSX is completely solidified. They're still at the table with us, and they're still committed to this just like we are. The financing is in place and was not impacted. We're working on the last piece right now. I got some meetings next week to talk about kind of the Canton Railroad and kind of that component of it. So that project is well underway and ready to move. And so I think I agree with you, Senator, that's a huge project economically for the port. If you look, or for the whole region, really, if you look at our competing ports across the eastern seaboard and the amount of cargo that they're putting out on rail compared to where we are, because we have that bottleneck with Howard Street, I think we're going to be able to really open up growth, especially on the containerized cargo side, and put that freight out on rail as opposed to kind of putting it all out on truck and with some bottlenecks and be able to really make an economic impact. So I'm excited about that one as well, but well underway, not impacted in any way by this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Edwards. As we close, I guess I just wanted to first start by thanking Steve McCullough, who did very due diligence in reference to the analyst that was presented here. Kim Landry for always focusing us and directing us in the right way. But most importantly, Mr. Secretary, thank you to you and your team. I know that you have large challenges that are in front of you. I feel as though that you can meet those challenges, you and your team. But please know that we do have a couple unanswered questions and the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Committee wants to be a partner in reference to this project and making sure that it moves forward at the cost that's minimum to the taxpayers. And obviously there will be some form of a cost in trying to meet the best timeline that can be presented. Just the recap, some of the unanswered questions, but notably unanswered questions that couldn't be addressed at this moment, is that if you could keep us abreast in reference to this 9-month timeline, in reference to the choosing of the contractor, just know that the committee has an interest in that. The second one, you heard it a couple times, but it wasn't able to be answered at this moment. Once we get a projected timeline before the public, so that we can answer this towards our constituents, that would be greatly appreciated. And the last one is in reference to the cost. As we identify and we get closer to choosing the contractor and we get some assumption in reference to what the cost is going to be over the 5.6 billion, it will be greatly appreciated if that's communicated with the PST subcommittee. Thank you again for your due diligence, and thank you for this opportunity. And this is the end of the briefing.
Thank you all. Be safe.
Have a blessed day.
Thank you all.
Take care.